So today we will discuss about tuberous sclerosis. Tuberous sclerosis complex. It is inherited neurocutaneous disorder that is characterized by the pleomorphism of features involving many organ systems, including multiple benign hematoma of the brain, eyes, heart, lung, liver, kidney, skin. The expression of the disease varies substantially. Diagnosis can be made clinically or through genetic testing. TSC, tuberous sclerosis complex, is autosomal dominant in inheritance, and incidence is about 1 in 5,000 to 10,000 live births. It is caused by mutation in either TSC1 gene or TSC2 gene. TSC1 gene and TSC2 gene, hamartin and tuberin proteins are encoded by these genes. So TSC1 codes for hamartin and TSC2 codes for tuberin. Okay. So there are multiple hematomas in the bodies, and now we are going to discuss about its clinical features. It is characterized by development of variety of benign tumors. I have already told you that it involves multiple organs. There is increased risk of malignancy in TSC as well. Nearly all patients with TSC have one or more of the skin lesions characteristics of the disorders. Most patients have epilepsy and one half or more have cognitive deficits and learning disabilities. One half or more have cognitive deficits and learning disabilities. And other clinical manifestations include autism, behavioral problems, and psychosocial difficulties. Collectively, these are termed TSC-associated neuropsychiatric disorders, TAND, TSC-associated neuropsychiatric disorders. These problems are usually associated with brain lesions, including glioneural hematoma, also called tumors, periventricular giant cell astrocytoma, and abnormalities of cerebral white matter detected on neuroimaging studies. However, there is a wide variety of phenotypes between and within families regarding the number and severity of TSC manifestations. Other possible manifestations of TSC reported in occasional patients include vascular anomalies, limb overgrowth, hemihypertrophy, and segmental lymphedema. Now, there may be dermatological features as well, skin manifestations. 81 to 95% of patients with TSC have one of the characteristics skin lesion, and it was shown in one population-based studies. And most common lesions are hypopigmented macules, also known as S-leaf spots, angiofibroma, sometimes called fibroadenoma, previously called adenoma sebaceum, which typically involves malar regions of the face. Involves malar regions of the face. Previously it was called adenoma sebaceum. Sjagren patches, seen most commonly over the lower back. You can Google those images, Sjagren patches. And a distinctive brown fibrous plaque on the forehead, which may be the first and most readily recognized feature of TSC, to be appreciated on physical examination of affected neonates and infants. There is fibrous plaque in a child with TSC. And there is a distinctive on forehead, which may be the first and most readily recognized feature of TSC, to be appreciated on physical examination of affected neonates and infants. Hypomelanotic macules and fibrous forehead plaques typically appear earlier than facial angiofibroma or ungual fibroma. Periungual and subungual fibroma may develop during adolescence or adulthood and occur more commonly on the toenails or the fingernails. Okay? Given the variable age of onset, it is important for clinicians to inspect the nails of both the patient and the parents when first doing an evaluation for TSC. Longitudinal nail groups without visible fibroma are commonly seen. Novitudinal nail groups without visible fibroma. Less frequent acral lesions include subungual red comets, red longitudinal streaks with larger distal head and narrowing proximal tail, red comet. splinter hemorrhage, longitudinal leukocytia, white streaks extending from nail matrix to the end of nail. Leukocytia. Solitary subungual fibroma as a result of trauma is not diagnostic feature of TSC. On the other hand, a history of trauma in a patient presenting with ungual fibroma should not be used to discount the possibility of TSC. There is no significant risk of malignant transformation of the skin lesions, which tend to increase in size and number throughout puberty and tend to be stable over time. Brain lesions, glandular hematoma, also called cortical tumors, subependymal nodules, subependymal giant cell tumor, also known as subependymal giant cell astrocytoma, white matter heterotopia, dysplastic and dysmyelinated white matter lesions. Hematoma, both cortical glandular hematoma and subependymal nodules are regarded as hematoma. Cortical glandular hematoma are composed of histologically of enlarged, atypical, and disorganized neuronal and glial elements with astrocytosis. In keeping with their hematomatous nature, glandular hematoma is preferred in place of the outdated term tumor, tumor, when describing or finding in patients. Subependymal nodules are also composed of atypically enlarged glial and neural cells. These nodules are indistinguishable histology from subependymal giant cell tumor, SGCT. Okay, so you have to keep this also in mind. And cortical glandular hematoma and subependymal nodules are present on brain MRI in approximately 90% of children with TSC. The detection rate of this lesion is moderately lower on CT. Cortical glandular hematoma may be calcified on CT scan in approximately half of patients, and subependymal nodules are usually calcified on CT except in early years of life. In order to minimize radiation exposure, the use of CT monitoring for children with TSC should be limited. So these are brain manifestations, and now we are going to talk about epilepsy. It is one of the most frequent significant cause of morbidity, affecting 79 to 90% of patients in population-based study. Seizures begin in first year of life in just over 60% of cases. However, patients with TS remain at risk for new onset seizure into adult life. In a natural history study that included 248 patients with TSC who had a single seizure, epilepsy subsequently developed in 99%. Seizures are the most frequent presenting feature of TSC. Infantile spasms are the most common type at initial diagnosis, occurring in 36 to 69% of patients. Conversely, up to 25% of children with infantile spasm may have TSC. Other seizure types that occur in TSC include focal onset seizure with and without impaired awareness, focal onset to bilateral tonic-clonic seizure, previously termed as secondary generalized, and less commonly generalized onset seizure. Approximately 75% of patients have epileptic form abnormalities and routine electroencephalography. These include focal or multifocal discharge, hypsarrhythmia, and generalized spike wave abnormalities in 48, 19, and 8% respectively. Not all cortical glandular hematoma are epileptogenic, and patients with TSC and epilepsy may have normal brain MRI studies, raising significant questions about the role of glandular hematoma in producing seizures. Furthermore, epileptic foci can shift over time. And cognitive disability is primary feature of TSC, affecting 45 to 65% of patients in population-based reports, which is associated with the history of infantile spasm, refractory seizure, and to a lesser extent number of glandular hematoma. However, there is a complex relationship between glandular hematoma, epilepsy, and cognitive function in TSC. Autism and behavioral problems, including hyperactivity, inattention, and self-injurious behavior, are common in children with TSC and can be a significant source of stress for parents and caregivers. In different case series, the prevalence of significant behavioral problems among children with TSC range from 40 to 90%, while behavioral problems can occur in the setting of either normal intelligence or cognitive dysfunction. At least one case series found that low intellectual functioning and high seizure frequency were risk factors for behavioral disorders. Whether autism is associated with a specific location of glionural hematoma is uncertain. Cardiovascular manifestations include rhabdomyoma. It is a benign tumor that often presents as multiple lesions. It is one of the most common pediatric cardiac tumors. Most infants and children have cardiac rhabdomyoma have TSC. Who have cardiac rhabdomyoma have TSC, most infants and children. However, rhabdomyoma are not a universal finding in children with TSC. In one longitudinal series of 125 patients with TSC, rhabdomyoma were found overall in 58%, including 61% of children ages 0 to 4 and 36% of children ages 5 to 18. Rhabdomyoma associated with TSC are typically multifocal. Occasionally, cardiac rhabdomyoma appear as an isolated finding in TSC. Cardiac rhabdomyoma characteristically develop in utero and are often detected on prenatal ultrasound. In longitudinal series of 125 patients with TSC, the finding of one or more cardiac rhabdomyoma before or soon after birth was the initial sign of TSC in 18%. Although many rhabdomyoma are asymptomatic, patients with TSC and cardiac rhabdomyoma are most likely to be symptomatic in the newborn and early infancy period. Therefore, after cardiac rhabdomyoma usually undergo a spontaneous regression. The morbidity and mortality associated with these tumors reflect the potential for flow abnormalities if they grow to sufficient size to restrict blood flow. In one report that included 15 children with symptomatic cardiac rhabdomyoma, the clinical presentation was heart failure or cardiac murmur in 6% each and arrhythmia in 3 patients. There is no evidence that cardiac rhabdomyoma undergo malignant transformation and no treatment is necessary for asymptomatic tumors, particularly when first noted in older child or adult with TSC. Coarctation of aorta and constriction of major arteries such as renal artery stenosis are sometimes associated with TSC. Aortic aneurysm may also occur. And now let's talk about what are the kidney manifestations. Renal lesions are common among patients with TSC ranges and their prevalence increases with age. Angiomyolipoma are the most frequent renal manifestation of TSC. Less often benign cyst, lymphangioma and renal cell carcinoma occur. Progression, enlargement of angiomyolipoma and hemorrhage into the lesions can result in pain and interfere with renal function. The risk of hemorrhage increase with size. Patients with tuberous sclerosis and renal lesion may have renal-independent hypertension and at risk for developing chronic kidney disease due to replacement and compression of renal parenchyma. Pulmonary manifestations. Some adults develop pulmonary disease that is indistinguishable from diffuse interstitial fibrosis known as lymphangiomatosis. This condition represents a cystic lung disease that can result in significant limitation in pulmonary function. The most common presenting feature of lymphangiomatosis are dyspnea and pneumothorax. Among adults with TSC, the prevalence of lymphangiomatosis is higher for women than for men. The condition may worsen during pregnancy and can be life-limiting complication of TSC. Ophthalmic manifestations include retinal and non-retinal abnormality and are useful in making the diagnosis. These lesions rarely affect vision and do not require a specific treatment. Retinal hematoma, punched out areas of chorioretinal depigmentation, that is retinal achromic patches in the mid-periphery of the retina. Non-retinal lesions, angiofibroma of the eyelids, non-paralytic strabismus coloboma. Among the refractory errors, myopia, hyperopia, astigmatism, and risk of invasive malignancy. What is the risk? It is TSC associated with variety of benign hematomatous tumors known as angiofibroma, rhabdomyoma, angiomyolipoma. However, both children and adults with TSC are at risk for malignant tumors, primarily in the kidneys, brain, and soft tissue. In a report that analyzed 16,564 cases of childhood cancer, 509 cases were diagnosed in patients with genetic disease, and of those children with TSC accounted for 20 cases. Based upon estimated prevalence of TSC of 1 in 15,000 children in the United Kingdom, the relative risk of malignancy in children with TSC was 18-fold higher than those without TSC. This was almost entirely due to increased incidence of brain tumors and rhabdomyosarcoma. It has been suggested that the risk of imaginary cancer is higher in patients with TSC2 than TSC1 mutation. So, specific observations regarding malignancy. What uh, what are the specific observations that we have seen? A spontaneous malignant transformation of subependymal giant cell tumor have been described. Adults with TSC are at increased risk for development of renal cell carcinoma. Some angiomyolipoma can become malignant, and there are usually of the epithelioid type. Although rare, there is an increased risk of rhabdomyosarcoma in both children and adults with TSC. Since they are not localized to one organ system, there is no specific surveillance for these tumors. The periodic surveillance that is recommended for all patients with TSC is predominantly focused on monitoring the development of benign and malignant tumors. So, how do we evaluate and diagnose? The diagnosis is based upon clinical criteria. Genetic testing is not required to make a diagnosis in patients who fulfill the criteria for definitive TSC, but is helpful for family studies. Example, defining disease status and reproductive status risk for relatives, and particularly for patients with probable or possible TSC due to age-dependent penetrance of some features of TSC and the possibility of somatic mosaicism. Therefore, we suggest molecular genetic testing for disease-specific mutation in TSC1 and TSC2 genes for all individuals with suspected TSC. Certain clinical scenarios should raise suspicion for diagnosis of TSC. The prenatal detection of cardiac rhabdomyoma, detection of hypopigmented skin markers, the onset of seizure, particularly infantile spasms, and evaluation for autism with or without cognitive disabilities. The classic TSC diagnostic triad of seizures, intellectual disability, that is mental retardation, and facial angiofibroma, Vogt triad, VOGT, Vogt triad, seizures, intellectual disability, and facial angiofibroma occurs in less than one third of patients with TSC. Thus, clinicians must be familiar with the full spectrum of TSC associated diagnostic features and not rely on this outdated concept. Furthermore, there is a range of phenotypes between and within families that include patients with normal to severely impaired neurological functions. In particular, a parent who is somatic mosaic or a mutation may have mild features. However, an offspring who inherits the mutation will not be mosaic and may have much earlier onset of symptoms and more severe symptoms than parent. Diagnostic criteria. Current diagnostic criteria from International Tuberous Sclerosis Complex Consensus Conference allow for the diagnosis of TSC based upon genetic testing results and clinical findings. So, we are going to talk about diagnostic criteria, genetic diagnostic criteria, and clinical diagnostic criteria. Identification of TSC1 or TSC2 pathogenic mutation in DNA from a normal tissue is sufficient to make diagnosis of TSC. A pathogenic mutation is defined as mutation that clearly inactivates the function of TSC1 or TSC2 proteins. Example, nonsense mutation prevents protein synthesis, or is a missense mutation whose effect on protein function has been established by functional assessment. Note that 10 to 25% of patients with TSC have no mutation identified by conventional genetic testing, and a normal result does not exclude TSC or have any effect on the use of clinical diagnostic criteria to diagnose TSC. Clinical diagnostic criteria are major, minor, definite, possible. We will discuss under those headings. So, major features: hypomelanotic lesions, 3 or more, at least 5 mm diameter, 3 or more angiofibroma or fibrous cephalic plaque, ungual fibroma, 2 or more ungual fibroma, Sjagren patches, connective tissue nevus, multiple retinal hematoma, cortical dysplasia including tumors and cerebral white matter, radial migration lines, subependymal nodules, subependymal giant cell astrocytoma, cardiac rhabdomyoma, lymphangiomyomatosis, and 2 or more angiomyolipoma. A combination of lymphangiomyomatosis and angiomyolipoma without other features does not meet criteria for definitive diagnosis. And now minor clinical features: confetti skin lesions, 1 to 2 mm hypomelanotic macules, 3 or more dental enamel pits, 2 or more intraoral fibroma, retinal achromic patch, multiple renal cyst, non-renal hematoma, and for definitive TSC, two major clinical features or one major and two or more minor clinical features. For possible TSC, either one major clinical features or two or more minor clinical features. So for definitive to say, there should be two major clinical features or one major and two or more minor clinical features. So major clinical features, I am again going to repeat it. 3 or more hypomelanotic macules at least 5 mm in diameter. 3 or more angiofibroma or fibrous cephalic plaque. 2 or more uncal fibroma, Sjogren patch, multiple retinal hematoma, cortical dysplasia, subependymal nodules, subependymal giant cell astrocytoma, cardiac rhabdomyoma, lymphangiomatosis, and 2 or more angiomyolipoma. Again note that a combination of lymphangiomatosis and angiomyolipoma without other features does not meet criteria for definitive diagnosis. Since I told you that 2 or more major clinical features meets the criteria for definitive TSC. Now I am going to repeat minor features. 1 to 2 mm hypomelanotic macules, confetti skin lesions, dental interenamel pits that must be 3 or more, 2 or more intraoral fibroma, retinal achromic patch, multiple renal cyst, and non-renal hematoma. And diagnostic certainty depends upon the number of major and minor features. I am again repeating, definitive requires 2 major features or 1 major and 2 or more minor features. Possible TSC requires either 1 major features or 2 or more minor features. Some women have angiomyolipoma and the kidney associated with pulmonary lymphangiomatosis, but not other TSC related features. These patients do not have increased risk of having affected child, therefore they are not considered to have TSC. Okay, so now about genetic testing. I have already told you a positive test for TSC or TSC1, TSC2 mutation in non-lesional tissue is sufficient to make definitive diagnosis of TSC independent of clinical finding. Genetic testing is most helpful in confirming the diagnosis in any individual with possible TSC who does not meet the criteria for definite TSC by clinical evaluation. It is also useful for pre-implantation or prenatal diagnosis and to identify whether other at-risk relatives, parents or siblings carry the mutation. International TSC guidelines recommend genetic testing when the diagnosis is suspected or in quiescence but cannot be clinically confirmed. Disease-causing mutation in TSC1 or TSC2 genes can be detected in 75-90% of patients who meet the diagnostic criteria because of the wide spectrum of mutation mechanisms. Full sequencing plus analysis for small and large scale deletions of both TSC1 and TSC2 genes is necessary for comprehensive molecular diagnosis of patients with suspected TSC. Since 10 to 25% of individuals have TSC have no mutations identified by genetic testing, a negative mutation does not exclude the diagnosis of TSC in an apparently affected child. Furthermore, a positive test does not predict either the severity or nature of the disease complications. One cause of negative genetic test is the presence of somatic mosaicism, which is estimated to occur in 2 to 10% of de novo cases of TSC. In somatic mosaicism, the mutation in the TSC1 or TSC2 gene is not present in all cells. This occurs when the mutation occurs in the developing embryo and results in variable mixture of normal and affected cells in different tissue. In individuals with mosaicism, mutation testing performed on DNA from blood leukocytes may be normal, depending upon the degree of mosaicism in the blood. Also, parents who are negative on genetic testing for TSC mutation found in their affected child may still carry the mutation as either a low-level somatic or germinal mosaic. Thus, they may be at risk for having future children affected with TSC. It is very important to make these points clear to parents. Initial evaluation Initial screening evaluation should confirm the diagnosis by identifying clinical features of TSC. History should be obtained regarding symptoms associated with this disorder. The parents should be questioned specifically about the presence or absence of seizures or developmental delay, which are frequently associated with TSC but are not diagnostic criteria for the disorder. A detailed family history should also be obtained. Uh, Let me check it one thing again. Okay. So, a detailed family history should be obtained to detect possible symptoms of TSC. International TSC guidelines recommend obtaining a 3-generation family history to assess for additional family members at risk for TSC. When possible, parents and siblings should be examined for characteristic signs. Physical examination should focus on the skin and neurological systems. The skin should be thoroughly examined for characteristic dermatological features, including hypopigmented macules, fibroadenoma, saccharine patch, and distinctive brown fibrous plaque often present on the forehead. Skin manifestations are most apparent on the face. Use of Wood's lamp may facilitate the identification of hypopigmented macules. The presence of or absence of each of the major dermatological features should be specifically recorded in the medical record. Parents of a child suspected of having TSC should undergo a similar examination. Careful neurological examination should be performed. Ophthalmic evaluation may identify the characteristic TSC lesions, which include retinal hematoma, hypopigmented choroidal lesions, and lead angiofibroma. Cranial MRI should be performed to detect cortical glomerular hematoma, subependymal nodules, subependymal giant cell tumors, or cerebral white matter abnormality. Imaging with the MRI of the abdomen or renal ultrasound is indicated to evaluate for presence of renal angiomyolipoma or renal cyst. Okay. Other studies depend upon the history and physical findings. Electroencephalogram should be obtained in children with history of seizures or spells suspicious of seizures. So, what is the natural history of tuberous sclerosis complex? It is a progressive disorder, but the individual features have different natural history. In addition, because of the expression of TSC varies significantly among patients and within the families, it is difficult to predict the extent to which a child with newly diagnosed disease is affected. Extent to which a child with newly diagnosed disease is affected. In infancy, all of the clinical features of TSC may not be apparent in the first year of life. Thus, a child is often diagnosed initially with possible or probable TSC and later diagnosed with definite TSC after additional features are identified. Rather than waiting for additional features to emerge, the diagnosis of definite TSC can be confirmed in this setting by molecular genetic testing, which reveals a disease-causing TSC1 or TSC2 gene mutation in 75 to 90% of individuals who eventually meet clinical diagnostic criteria for TSC. Childhood, many of the dermatological features of TSC become apparent during childhood. Thus, the diagnosis of TSC is often first made upon the hyperpigmented macules, forehead plaque, or angiofibroma of the face becomes visible. Thus, the diagnosis of TSC is often first made once the hypopigmented macules, forehead plaque, or angiofibroma of the face becomes visible. In addition, certain neurological problems, including learning disability, first become apparent during childhood. The risk of developmental delay may be increased for those with TSC2 pathogenic variant, as suggested by prospective study of 92 children with TSC who had genetic testing and evaluation of cognition, language, and motor development. Significant developmental delay at age 24 months were present in approximately 3/4 of those with TSC2 pathogenic variant and only 1/4 of patients with TSC1 pathogenic variant. Complications caused by subependymal giant cell tumor growth are most likely to occur during childhood, with these lesions stabilizing during the teens to 20s. In a retrospective review cited above, there were 74 children with TSC diagnosed from age 1 to 10 years and most presented with new onset seizures or history of seizures. In addition, a family history of TSC and dermatological features were common presenting features. Among 16 patients diagnosed from age 11 to 20 years, the most common presenting features were new onset seizures and angiofibroma. The diagnosis of TSC is sometimes made in adults, and after the diagnosis is made in affected child, particularly if the patient is mosaic for TSC1 or TSC2 mutation and is mildly affected. Features of TSC that are likely to first present in adulthood as significant problems include renal angiomyolipoma, periungual fibroma, and lymphangiomatosis. Prenatal evaluation of the TSC is autosomal dominant, and only minority of patients have known family history of TSC. The remaining cases represent new mutation or mosaicism in the affected parents. In such cases, the parents are often surprised and distressed when the diagnosis of TSC is made in child. Furthermore, because of the variable clinical features, making a diagnosis of TSC in a parent after the diagnosis is made in his or child is not unusual. Normal intelligence and absence of the history of seizures in patients do not exclude the diagnosis of the TSC. When the diagnosis is made in a child with no family history of the disorder, both parents should be evaluated. This evaluation includes testing of the familial TSC mutation. If TSC1 or TSC2 mutation has been identified in the child, a thorough examination of the skin, ophthalmologic examination, cranial MRI, RCT, MRI of the abdomen, or renal ultrasound is indicated to evaluate both presence of renal angiomyolipoma and renal cyst. The importance of determining whether a parent is affected lies in providing appropriate follow-up for the parent. At example, screening for renal disease and in providing risk estimate of having subsequent child with TSC. Because TSC is inherited in autosomal dominant pattern, the risk of this disorder is in each offspring and affected parent is 50%. However, if neither parent meets the clinical criteria for TSC, the risk of parents having another child is TSC is only about 1 to 2%. The risk, which is higher than expected if there is due to second de novo mutation, is due to either somatic or germline mosaicism, which occurs when either parent carries the mutation in more than one egg or a sperm cell. As mentioned previously, an adult who is mosaic for severe mutation, example truncatic mutation in TSC2, may be mildly affected. However, any offspring who inherits this mutation will not be mosaic. They will carry the mutation in every cell of the body and may be severely affected. So, pre-implantation and prenatal testing. Now, let's talk about this. Reproductive decision by couples are facilitated by appropriate genetic counseling. Prospective parents should be aware that TSC exhibits wide clinical variability within families and that establish the diagnosis prenatally cannot predict the severity or outcome. The couple should also be understand that the risk of having an affected child could be substantially lowered by use of reproductive technology, including sperm or oocyte donation, depending upon which parent is affected. Pre-implantation or prenatal genetic test with DNA analysis can be performed in families in which a specific mutation in TSC1 or TSC2 gene has been identified in an affected family member. For families where a specific TSC mutation is identified, the couple may be elected to use pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. This involves single cell analysis after biopsy of an embryo obtained through in vitro fertilization and subsequent implantation of the embryo at low risk of carrying the mutation. Prenatal testing of TSC1 or TSC2 mutation of a specimen obtained during pregnancy through either chronic villus sampling or amniocentesis is also available to couples. So now we are going to talk about prognosis and management of TSC. So management is directed at its neurologic and systemic manifestations, which include seizures, TSC-associated neuropsychiatric disorders, brain tumors, skin lesions, renal disease, pulmonary disease, cardiac involvement, and increased risk of malignant tumors. So many children with TSC develop focal seizures and infantile spasm during infancy. Therefore, international TSC guidelines recommend that parents should be educated to recognize these types of seizures, even if none have occurred at the time of initial diagnosis. In addition, all pediatric patients with TSC should have baseline electroencephalography, even if seizures are not evident. Baseline. Children who have abnormal EEG, particularly those with features of TSC-associated neuropsychiatric disorder, should have follow-up 24-hour video electroencephalography to look for subclinical seizure activity or epileptiform discharge. TSC guidelines recommend EEG monitoring for individuals with TSC who have known or suspected seizure activity. The frequency of such monitoring should be determined by clinical need rather than a defined time interval. The guidelines noted that prolonged video EEG is appropriate when seizures occurrence is unclear or when there are unexplained changes in sleep behavior or cognitive or neurological function. Okay. So MRI should also be obtained in addition to EEG for evaluation of tumors, brain hematoma. And let's talk about cognitive and behavioral problems. Although patients may have normal intelligence, cognitive disability is common and a primary feature of TSC. In addition, autism and autistic behaviors, including hyperactivity, inattention, self-injurious behaviors, are common in children with TSC who have seizures and can be a significant source of stress for parents and caregivers. International guidelines recommend that all newly diagnosed patients should be evaluated for TSC-associated neuropsychiatric disorders, including possible aggressive behaviors, autism spectrum disorders, intellectual disability, psychiatric disorders, neuropsychological deficits, physical problems, and occupational difficulties. Therefore, all patients with TSC should be screened for TAND, neuropsychiatric disorders, at least once a year. In addition, the guidelines recommend a comprehensive formal evaluation for TA&D at key developmental time points during infancy, 0 to 3 years, at preschool years, at pre-middle school years, adolescence, early adulthood, and as needed thereafter. In addition, any sudden neurobehavioral changes should prompt an evaluation to identify and treat possible medical causes such as subsequent damage and cell tumor, seizures, or renal disease. Nearly all patients have one or more of the skin lesions characteristics of the disorders. International guidelines recommend performing detailed skin examination at the time of diagnosis and annually thereafter. Good skin protection is recommended for individuals with TSC since hypopigmented macros are susceptible to sunburn, since ultraviolet induced DNA damage may play a role in the development of facial angiofibroma. There is no significant risk of malignant transformation of skin lesions associated with TSC, which tend to be stable after puberty. When not prominent, the skin lesions do not require treatment. However, closer surveillance and intervention is recommended for skin lesions that rapidly change in size or number, and for those that cause pain, bleeding, functional impairment, and social problems. Many patients complain about the cosmetic impact of the facial angiofibroma and the lack of effective treatment. International guidelines recommend performing a detailed dental and oral inspection of examination at the time of diagnosis for dental enamel, pits, and intraoral fibroma. Therefore, guidelines recommend dental and oral examination every 3 to 6 months, and periodic preventive measures include oral hygiene. Due to risk of jaw bone cyst formation, panoramic radiography evaluation is recommended by age 6 or 7 years or earlier if there is asymmetry, asymptomatic swelling, or delayed abnormal tooth eruption. Renal disease, like the most common is angiomyolipoma, while renal cystic disease is second most common. All patients with TC, we recommend, or the guidelines recommend, renal surveillance with MRI at the time of diagnosis with repeat testing every 1 to 3 years. 3 years if there are no identified angiolipoma, myelopoma, and initially screening, and potentially more often for patients with identified kidney lesions. Pulmonary disease. Some adults with TSC develop pulmonary disease that is indistinguishable from diffuse interstitial fibrosis known as lymphangiomatosis. This condition can result in significant limitation of pulmonary functions. Cardiac problems. The characteristic cardiac feature of TSC is rhabdomyoma, a benign tumor that often presents as multiple lesions in neonates with TSC. and maybe visualize antenatal bifetal ultrasound scan must regress spontaneously during infancy, and resection is not required unless the child is symptomatic. International guidelines note that for individuals with rhabdomyoma identified by prenatal ultrasound, fetal echocardiography may be useful to detect those with high risk of heart failure after delivery. Children with TSC, particularly those less than 3 years of age, should be have baseline echo and electrocardiography to evaluate for rhabdomyoma and arrhythmia respectively. Adults with TSC and no cardiac history or symptoms do not require echocardiography. However, baseline electrocardiography is recommended to assess for cardiac conduction defects. For follow-up, the guidelines recommend that asymptomatic children with TSC and rhabdomyoma have echocardiography every 1 to 3 years until the regression of rhabdomyoma is documented. Asymptomatic patients of all ages should have ECG electrocardiogram every 3 to 5 years to monitor for conduction defect. Patients with symptoms or additional risk factors may need more frequent or advanced assessment, such as ambulatory event monitoring. Now, ophthalmologic evaluation. International guidelines recommend complete ophthalmologic examination, including fundoscopy, at the time of diagnosis and annually thereafter to look for retinal abnormalities and visual field defects. Diagnosis of childhood TSC has a major impact on family. Counseling should be provided for patient and families as well. So, what is the prognosis? It is since I have told you it is progressive disorder and the individual features tend to emerge at different times. The severity of the disease can vary substantially among affected individuals. Some may demonstrate only dermatologic features of the disease, while others may develop more serious neurologic or systemic manifestations. Cause of death. Complications in major organ system are the predominant source of morbidity in adolescents and young adults with TSC, and they contributed to increased mortality. In one report of 325 patients who come to my clinic, there were 40 patients that were attributable to tuberous sclerosis complex, which was more than expected in the general population. Neurologic disease, including 10 patients who died as a result of subsequent damage and cell tumor, and 13 patients who died as a consequence of severe mental handicaps. Status epilepticus or pneumonia was the most common cause of death. Renal disease, including renal carcinoma, hemorrhage into angioma, and lipoma, and renal failure are the next most common cause of death. Other causes of mortality include pulmonary disease in 4 patients, all of whom died at age 40 or older from lymphangiomatosis and bronchopneumonia. Several children with severe developmental delay and intractable seizure died from pneumonia, and cardiac rhabdomyoma resulted in death in one of the infant. In one report of 284 patients with TSC from the United Kingdom, there were 16 deaths attributable to complications of TSC. Of these, 8 were caused by renal disease and 4 by sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. Of the remainder, 2 deaths were secondary to complications of lymphangiomatosis. One was from subsequent damage and cell tumor, and one was due to pancreatic cancer. So, TSC is variable in severity. Some individuals may demonstrate only dermatological features, while others may develop more serious neurologic or systemic manifestations. And I want to end my talk with this. Thank you.